You decided to do this because you are tired of deciding things based on fear. That's the honest version. The version you tell people at dinner parties is that you've always wanted to see the subcontinent, that you read about the temples and the trains and the colors, and you booked the ticket. Both versions are true, but the second one is the acceptable one. The one that doesn't require anyone to sit with the fact that the primary thing driving your itinerary is a refusal to keep shrinking your life to fit other people's comfort with what a woman alone is supposed to do. You land in Delhi. Indira Gandhi International Airport is one of the busiest in Asia, handling over 70 million passengers a year. None of that statistic prepares you for the sensory fact of arriving at 2 a.m., exhausted and jet-lagged, into a terminal that is somehow both enormous and claustrophobic, full of men in groups watching the arrival's gate with an attention that you clock immediately and file away. You tighten your grip on your backstrap. You find a prepaid taxi booth inside the terminal, because every solo female travel guide, every forum, every woman who has been here before you says the same thing. Prepaid booth inside, not the men outside offering the same service. You take the prepaid taxi. The driver is fine. The ride is fine. You watch Delhi move past the window in the dark. The wide roads, the sleeping stalls, the occasional cow standing on a median with the energy of someone who owns the situation entirely. You arrive at your guest house. You lock the door. You sit on the bed and breathe for a minute. You are here. The fear didn't stop you. That already counts for something. You are not paranoid. You are calibrated. There is a difference. And India will teach you that difference faster than anywhere else you've been. The thing about traveling solo as a woman in India is that it contains two simultaneous and completely real experiences that people back home cannot seem to hold at the same time. The first is that India is extraordinary. Genuinely, repeatedly, almost aggressively extraordinary in the way it looks and sounds and smells and the way it refuses to be summarized or reduced. The second is that navigating it alone as a woman requires a continuous, low-level vigilance that becomes so automatic, you stop noticing it until you arrive somewhere safe and realize how tense your shoulders have been for the past 6 hours. Both things are true at the same time. Anyone who tells you only the first is romanticizing. Anyone who tells you only the second is letting fear win on their behalf. You spend the first week in Rajasthan because Rajasthan is where most itineraries begin, and there is a reason for that. Jaipur, Jodhpur, Jaisalmer, the pink city, the blue city, the gold city. The architecture is not a metaphor. The buildings actually are those colors, painted and plastered over centuries, and standing in front of the Mehrangarh Fort in Jodhpur, with the blue city spreading out below you, is one of those moments where your brain simply runs out of adjectives and goes quiet. The fort was built in 1459. It sits on a 410-foot high rock. The view from the ramparts does something to your understanding of scale. You hire a female guide in Jaipur because the women-led tour companies that have grown across Rajasthan in the past decade are the real thing, not a gimmick. Your guide knows the Amber Fort the way someone knows their own house, the passages the tourist crowds miss, the angle of light at a specific hour that turns the mirror palace into something impossible. She also, without making it heavy, explains which neighborhoods are comfortable to walk alone after dark, and which are not. This is useful information delivered without drama. The way a friend tells you which street has uneven pavement, you write it down. The harassment exists. It would be dishonest to write around it. It ranges from staring, which is constant and exhausting, to men following you at a distance through markets to comment on your appearance, to being physically touched on public transportation in a way that is unambiguous in its intention. India has one of the highest rates of reported street harassment globally, and the data reflects what female travelers consistently describe. You develop responses. You make eye contact and say no loudly and clearly in public, which works because public shame operates as a deterrent in ways that quiet compliance does not. You position yourself near women on trains. You book female-only compartments on overnight journeys when they are available because they exist specifically because they are needed. None of this ruins the trip, but all of it is part of the trip, and pretending otherwise would be doing a disservice to every woman deciding whether to come. The Indian Railways network is one of the largest in the world, carrying approximately 23 million passengers per day across more than 67,000 kilometers of track. You will use it constantly, and it will become one of the primary textures of this trip. The overnight train from Jaisalmer to Jodhpur, the express from Agra to Varanasi, the slow local from somewhere to somewhere else, where a woman across the aisle offers you a piece of her lunch wrapped in newspaper, and you accept it because you've learned that refusing hospitality in India requires more explanation than accepting it. The food is good. You have no idea what it is. You eat all of it. You book 3AC class because it is the middle tier of air-conditioned travel, and because the women who have written about this before you say 3AC is a sweet spot. Safe. Social. Cheap enough that you don't feel like a tourist display. Not so crowded that you can't breathe. The berths fold into seats during the day. You sit by the window and watch India scroll past for hours, and the hours don't feel wasted. There is a particular quality of Indian light in the late afternoon, golden and thick, that lands on rice paddies and temple spires and roadside tea stalls with an indifference to whether or not you are watching. You watch anyway. On the train to Varanasi, a family in the opposite berths invites you to share their dinner. The mother is from Lucknow. The teenage daughter wants to know what it's like where you live, whether the food is good, whether you are married, whether your parents know you are traveling alone, whether you are afraid. You answer all of it. She listens the way teenagers listen. When an adult says something that rearranges a small piece of their understanding of what's possible, you don't know if that's actually what happened. But it felt like it. Varanasi is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world, with a documented history going back at least 3,000 years. Hindus believe that dying in Varanasi grants moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The city has been a site of pilgrimage, scholarship, and silk weaving for millennia. Mark Twain wrote that Varanasi was older than history, older than tradition, older even than legend. None of that context fully prepares you for the Ghats at dawn. You wake at 5 a.m. and walk to the river in the dark. The Ganges at sunrise in Varanasi is one of those places where the gap between what you expected and what is actually in front of you is so large that you spend the first 10 minutes simply recalibrating. Pilgrims bathing, priests performing arti, the fire ritual, the flames catching in the water, boats moving slowly in the mist, the smell of incense and flowers, and the river itself, which is ancient and complicated and sacred and heavily polluted all at the same time. Because Varanasi contains contradictions the way most cities contain traffic, you hire a boat. The boatman is old and says very little. You sit in the wooden boat and watch the city wake up from the water, and you feel something that is not quite peace and not quite awe, but is adjacent to both. A stillness that comes from being somewhere that has been absorbing human grief and hope and ritual for 3,000 years and has not run out of space for yours. The burning Ghats are also here. Manikarnika Ghat, where Hindu cremations happen continuously around the clock every day of the year, you approach with the care the place deserves. Photography is prohibited and you don't photograph. You watch from a respectful distance. The fires are tended by the Dom caste, whose hereditary role is to maintain the sacred flame. It has been burning, by some accounts, for thousands of years. You stand there and think about what it means to live in a city where death is not hidden, where the end of a life is conducted in public, in the open air, by the river, in the light. Back home, death is managed and minimized and kept behind closed doors. Here it is a fact of the street, treated with ceremony rather than concealment. You're not sure which approach is healthier. You're not sure the question has an answer. You think about it for days. You take a flight to Kerala because the overland journey would cost more time than you have left. Kerala sits on the southwestern tip of the peninsula, a narrow green strip between the Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea, and it is so different from Rajasthan that it is hard to believe you are in the same country, which is of course the point. India is not a country the way France is a country. It is a subcontinent that happens to share a government, containing within it dozens of distinct languages, food traditions, architectural histories, climates, and social norms. Traveling from Rajasthan to Kerala is not like moving through a single culture. It is like moving through several. Kerala has the highest literacy rate in India, over 94%, and a matrilineal tradition in certain communities that goes back centuries. The Nair community historically traced lineage and property through the female line. The state consistently ranks at the top of Indian states on gender development indices. This doesn't mean harassment doesn't exist here. It means the texture is different. The staring is less. The space you are given on the street is more. You notice this in your body before you articulate it in your head. Your shoulders are lower. You rent a houseboat on the backwaters for 2 days because the Kerala backwaters, a network of interconnected canals, rivers, and lakes stretching along the coast, are one of those things you read about and then arrive to find that the description was actually underselling it. The water is still. Coconut palms line the banks. Kingfishers. The cook on the boat makes fish curry from a catch pot that morning, and you eat it on the deck in the early evening, while the water turns pink. And you think, with some embarrassment about how long it took you to do this, that you should have started traveling alone much sooner. Nobody tells you how much India will make you think about other women. Not in an abstract, political way. In a specific, daily way. The women you see doing impossible physical labor in the heat, carrying loads, breaking stone on road construction sites, tending fields. The women in the cities navigating the same streets with a fluency and confidence that you admire and that you realize comes from a lifetime of having no other option. The women in the guest houses and the tour companies and the shops who are carving space for themselves in an economy that did not design itself around them and who are doing it with a matter-of-factness that is more radical than any statement. You think about your own vigilance and you put it next to theirs, and the comparison is humbling. You are visiting. This is their daily life. Your discomfort is a temporary inconvenience. Theirs is structural. These are not the same thing, and India will not let you forget the difference. Nobody tells you how kind the country is either. Not in the tourist industry sense. In the casual, unrequested sense. The auto rickshaw driver in Chennai, who, when you showed him a photo of the temple you were looking for, drove you there himself instead of directing you, waited while you went inside, and then refused extra fare because you were a guest in his city. And that was not how guests were treated. The elderly woman in Mysore who saw you studying a bus schedule with the concentration of someone doing calculus and simply took you by the arm and walked you to the right stop and stayed until the bus came. The young woman in Jaipur who saw a man following you in the market and inserted herself between you without being asked, linked her arm through yours, and walked with you for 2 blocks until he was gone. She didn't explain. You didn't ask. You both just kept walking. That last one lives in you. It will for a long time. The country will challenge you in ways you prepared for. It will undo you in ways you didn't. Both will happen on the same afternoon, sometimes within the same hour. You spend your last night in Mumbai because most international flights leave from there, and because Mumbai is the city that, more than any other in India, refuses to let you be a spectator. It pulls you into its current and carries you, the crowds on Marine Drive, the gateway of India, the local train network that moves 8 million people a day, and that you ride for one stop, just to say you did, gripping the overhead bar with both hands while the city blurs past the open doors. You eat your last meal at a Irani cafe, the old Parsi-style restaurants that have been serving chai and bun maska, butter bread rolls in Mumbai since the late 19th century. The ceiling fans are slow. The marble tables are worn smooth. The chai comes in a glass and is too sweet and perfect. An old man at the next table is reading a newspaper and does not look up. A group of college students are arguing loudly about a movie. A cat sits on the counter with the authority of an owner. The city outside is doing what Mumbai does at all hours, which is everything, all of it, at the same time. You sit there and take a quiet inventory. You were stared at every day. You were followed on 3 separate occasions. You were touched without your consent on public transport twice. You were overcharged more times than you counted. You were also helped by strangers more times than you counted. You saw things that rearranged your internal furniture and will not go back to their original positions. You ate food that recalibrated your understanding of what flavor is capable. You had conversations that will stay with you for years, many of them conducted across language gaps so wide they should have made conversation impossible. You were afraid, sometimes. You were overwhelmed, often. You were lonely for about 48 hours in the middle of the trip. A specific, clean loneliness that comes from being surrounded by millions of people and sharing an interior life with none of them. And then it passed, and something else replaced it, something quieter and more solid that you don't quite have a word for yet. You take the airport bus at midnight. The driver has a small shrine on the dashboard, a garland of marigolds around a small figure of Ganesha, the god of beginnings and the remover of obstacles. The marigolds are fresh. Someone put them there today. You land home and someone asks how it was, and you say incredible, which is true, and they nod and move on to something else, because incredible is the expected answer, and expected answers don't require follow-up questions. You don't correct them. Some things don't compress into conversation. The gats at dawn, the woman in the market who linked her arm through yours without a word, the fish curry on the backwater houseboat as the water turned pink. The specific weight of 30 days of sustained, low-level vigilance lifting from your shoulders the moment you cleared customs. The trip was not the answer to the thing that drove you to buy the ticket. You knew somewhere that it wouldn't be. But it was a month of being entirely, completely responsible for yourself in a place that offered you no easy defaults, no familiar systems to fall back on, no one to defer to. That turned out to be worth more than an answer. You go home, you sleep for 11 hours, you wake up and start looking at maps.